Here are 3 ways that we accidentally make it harder for our kids to listen. My name is Jodie Thornton, and I help parents all the time to get their kids to be able to listen without teaching them to be obedient or teaching them to acquiesce, and also without making them inconsiderate of other people, but actually using the core of gentle parenting principles to help our kids be ready to cooperate and get things done that are just the day-to-day stuff. So our first way that we accidentally make it hard for our kids to listen is that we ask when really we're telling them. So if you say, "Are you ready to put your shoes on?" you don't actually want to know the answer to that question, right? Unless you're literally going to be okay with them saying, "No, I don't want to put my shoes on. I don't want to go," right? Unless that's something that you're comfortable with. It's literally the situation that you're in. We don't want to ask when really we're telling, right? Now, this was hard for me to get out of the habit of, because it's how our culture works, right? We ask, and the implication is that the person will say yes unless they really can't. So what I did to help myself along the way was to, if I did 2 things. I would say the thing, I'd say, so instead of saying, "It's time to put your shoes on, okay?" I would say, "It's time to put your shoes on, capiche," right? So then capiche is like, I do want to know, do you understand, right? I don't want to know whether you want to put your shoes on or whether you're ready or you agree, but I do want to know if you understand, right? The second way I would do that is I would say, "Would you like to put your shoes on and go to the park?" And if my daughter at the time said no, I would say, "Oh, my sweetie, I'm so sorry. I asked you if you wanted to go to the park, but actually we're all going to the park and we don't have a choice. I'm sorry I asked," right? And so I'm expressing that that was a mistake on my part, which helps build trust with them, because they get to understand that you're learning a new skill, and this is the reason why you've changed tack. It's not, "Oh, well, I asked, but seeing as you're saying no, now I need to tell you that you don't have a choice," right? Or I'm like, "I asked, you said no, and now I'm going to try and convince you that you want to," right? So we really want to look at expressing the truth and apologizing when we've made a mistake in the process of learning a new skill, right? So another way that this comes across when we're asking when we should be telling is that when we're really wanting them to agree, right? It's like, "Well, don't you want to get to the park?" "Well, no, I really want to finish what I'm doing," or "I want another episode of Bluey," or whatever the thing is, right? Obviously not everybody uses screens, but just random examples of times where we're wanting them to agree with us when actually we don't need them to agree. We're expressing to them what needs to happen. Now, sometimes there are ways that we can compromise, or there are ways that we can solve the problem, but at least when we're asking, we want to express what we need to happen and why is it important. So I need you to brush your teeth because it's important to me that you don't have sore teeth a few weeks down the track, when your teeth will get, if you don't clean your teeth, they'll get really sore, and that's really important to me, right? Not, "I want you to agree that it's a good idea for you to brush your teeth," because if your child is quite young, the idea that their teeth may get like sore a few weeks or a few months down the track doesn't really resonate. It's too far outside of their ability to predict the consequences of their action. They don't know for sure it's true, and so we don't want to ask them to agree with something that they're not capable of agreeing. What we do want to say is that it's important to me that we look after your teeth, and that's why I'm going to make you do it, right? So we want to be really careful with those times where we're overriding their autonomy, but there are times where our children just don't have the level of prefrontal cortex functionality yet that they can make those decisions for themselves. So when we do need to step in and make those decisions, we're expressing it as something that we're doing. So that's the first way. The second way is that the tone of voice is frustrated to begin with. So it's like, "Can you please pick up your toys?" Right? Now, the reason that this is an issue is not because every time you ask them to do something, you have to be all sweet and loving and kind, but you can see how it's almost not a question, "Can you pick up your toys?" It's actually a criticism. It's like, "Why am I having to tell you to pick up your toys?" Or, "I've asked you 7 times to pick up your toys," or, "You shouldn't have left your toys there in the first place." And so your child is responding to the criticism. They're not actually hearing the request. And again, can you please pick up your toys? Depending on where you're at, lots of variables at play, but you may or may not actually, that may or may not actually be a question. It could be that it's an instruction, in which case we want to express that. But even if it is a request, we want to do it in a tone of voice that isn't a criticism dressed up as a question, right? So you don't have to be perfectly loving and grounded and sweet in your tone, but you could be cheeky. You can be frustrated, but it needs to come across that you're genuinely either asking a question or giving an instruction, and it's not a criticism dressed up as an instruction or a criticism dressed up as a question. Really, really important. Now, the third way that we make it more difficult for our kids to listen is that we ask and ask and ask and ask, and sometimes then yell, right? We go again and again and again. Now, the solution to this is not you ask and then if they don't do it, you give them consequences or rewards or all those kinds of things. That's a slower way to work. Lots of reasons why it's not ideal, but here is the way that's ideal, is that when you ask your child to do something, if they do not do it, your next step is to ask why. So, hey, sweetie, it's time to put your shoes on. You go and do something, you come back, the shoes are not on. Hey, sweetie, I asked you to put your shoes on, but they're not on. Can you tell me why? Right? And we're genuinely asking. Again, that tone of voice was pretty grounded, pretty sweet. Doesn't have to be that. It could be cheeky, could be frustrated, but it needs to be a question where we're genuinely asking, why are you not doing the thing that I asked? Because once we know why they're not doing the thing, then we can solve the problem. What we want to get to is a position where it's not just for your relationship with them, their relationship with their siblings, with their other parent, with their friends, everybody. If someone asks them to do something, we want them to either do it or to say, here's why I can't do that for you. Right? And depending on the situation, we want them to build the skills to either hold boundaries or to problem solve with the other person or to negotiate. Like there's all these other higher level skills, but they start with, if someone asks you to do something, you don't just acquiesce and do it. You don't just not do it and not talk about it. You communicate, and you communicate assertively, right? These are the skills we want to build, and we can start building them from when they're very young, when it's about getting their shoes on or putting the hat on to go outside or getting the teeth brushed. And we build that skill so it becomes default as they grow up. When someone asks me to do something, if I don't want to or I can't, I'm going to express that to them. I'm going to communicate well. I'm going to make sure that our relationship is healthy, even when I need to say no. That I'm confident and capable of holding boundaries when I need to. And I'm confident and capable of being assertive and making sure that the solution we come up with takes into account what's important to me and what's important to the other person. So I hope this is helpful. If you have any questions, or particularly if you've got a situation where you've tried to avoid these pitfalls and you're still stuck, please do send me an email, jody@jodythornton.com, and I would love to help you to figure out like what's the next step to get to a point where your child, really what we want to get to is that 90% of the time your child does what you ask, and 10% of the time when they don't, it's just a conversation. Like it's not a conflict, it's not an argument, it's not nagging, it's not you losing your cool, not your child getting upset that they've been asked to do something. You're just having a conversation and you're figuring out a way that works for both of you. So yeah, absolutely be in contact if there's anything I can do to help you get to that spot with getting your child to listen. Thanks so much for watching.